name's Travis Alexander. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in medical humanities at Rice University, where I work on the Translational Humanities for Public Health project. I'm lucky to be joined today by John Lee, who teaches in the English department at Suffolk University in Boston. And we're here to talk about a project that John submitted to the Translational Humanities Project, which is his book, An Epidemic of Rumors, How Stories Shape Our Perceptions of Disease, which came out back in 2014, but has just recently gotten more and more relevant. So with that in mind, John, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what that book did when it came out, as well as how you see its relevance changing today.
Certainly. So the book did come out in 2014, Utah State University Press, and it was an extension and revision of my dissertation, my PhD dissertation. My PhD is in folklore, which I got from Memorial University of Newfoundland up in Canada. And for that dissertation, I went to Toronto during the 2003-2004 SARS epidemic, because I knew that there was something very interesting from a folkloric perspective happening in terms of narratives, especially disease narratives, which is what I tend to mostly focus on. And I knew that there would be a large body of circulating narratives in Toronto that I wanted to study. And so I went there, did multiple interviews with people, and looked at how the kinds of narratives that existed during that outbreak, rumors, gossips, legends, jokes, conspiracy theories, cures and preventatives, and so on and so forth, how those narratives both shaped public perception of the disease and were shaped by public perception of the disease. And it works in this sort of swirling mass where the public and the narrative affect each other and build off of each other in this snowball effect. And one of the conclusions that I had after looking at all of these narratives, and then looking at the corpus of narratives that folklorists have gathered from previous epidemics and pandemics, I concluded that a lot of the narratives that we tell are the same, sometimes to the extent that you take out the word AIDS from a narrative that was circulating in the 1980s, put in the word SARS, and suddenly people are telling the same narrative in 2002. Not always, but a lot of the time. And from a larger perspective, we tell the same sort of bodies of narratives over and over again. We have quite often the same cures and preventatives that are circulating from one epidemic to the next, to the next, to the next, like bleach, for example. Very famously, President Trump suggested that we should inject these disinfectants, but bleach has been a common cure or preventative in diseases, in epidemics for at least 40 to 50 years. Colleagues of mine have collected narratives from the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, where bleach was considered to be a cure. We have Miracle Mineral Solution, which is freely available online, which is essentially bleach in pill form that people are recommended to take. And during the SARS epidemic in 2002-3, people were mistaking bleach as a cure or preventative. And it is, of course, for like hard, non-porous surfaces where it kills the virus, but people keep wanting to drink it or eat it or ingest it or inject it. And so I found that there are these bodies of narratives that just happen over and over and over again, which in some ways makes them predictable. And one of the things that has recently happened with the current COVID-19 pandemic is that it really, for the first time, gave me and my press, or my press and I, an opportunity to go back and look at my work and say, well, was I right? And over again, the same narratives are circulating during COVID-19, as were circulating during SARS, as were circulating during swine flu, as were circulating during the AIDS epidemic. And so there is this broad predictable pattern to that, which in some ways is nice because you know maybe what is happening. You can get a broad sense of what it is that is happening, as in, for example, pretty much every single epidemic, pandemic, for at least the last 100 years, has started off with othering, with racism, with xenophobia. This came from over there, point the finger at that person, you did this, your country did this, you're dirty, you're unclean. COVID-19 blamed Asians. Swine flu blamed Mexicans, because it was, of course, originally called Mexican flu. and so on and so forth. AIDS came from homosexuals and Haitians, and going back through the lines for this. So we have these large then patterns of reactions that can be useful, I postulate, when you're trying to deal with some of the more dangerous ones, like, for example, ingesting or injecting bleach. That's terribly bad for you. Don't ingest or inject bleach. But pretty much whatever the next pandemic is, someone is going to say, here's some bleach pills, maybe take them. And if we can sort of build up this general understanding in the public of this is what is going to happen, watch out for it when it comes, maybe we can stymie some of the negative effects that are going to come out of that. Or if everybody knows whatever the next vaccine is that comes along, there's going to be a huge reaction from people who believe that it contains microchips, which people have been talking about for decades. That's not a recent thing with COVID, or that the vaccines are going to give you autism, which people have been saying for decades, and so on and so forth. The hope is that if we get a large enough sense of what the narratives are, people will recognize the narratives and then say, oh, I remember that. That was last time, and it didn't happen then, so maybe I don't need to pay attention to it this time.
Unmute myself. So do you theorize in the book at all on the origin of these commonalities, right? If we can postulate that there are these consistent tropes and narratives that reoccur in successive pandemics, do you think at all about the impulse that that produces that commonality? I mean, is the othering paradigm sufficiently comforting or embedded in our, even the way that we attain meaning via differentiation of entities? I mean, where, what methods or theoretical paradigms come to mind for you to try to explain that commonality?
The multiple, and as a folklorist, and this is common in my field, we often move to other fields, psychology, for example, and take some of their ideas and use them to explain what it is that's happening in front of us. If I can sort of narrow it down, in my research, I look for 6 predominant reasons why disease narratives spread, specifically conspiracy theories, but that also spreads to other kinds of narratives like vaccine narratives and anger and et cetera. And these reasons explain why we keep telling the same stories over and over again. The first one is fear and anger, because obviously there's this new thing in front of you. It's dangerous. You don't want it to affect you. And so you try to find ways for it not to affect you. Combined with number 2, a lack of social power, which is not always the case. And this list is not meant to be inclusive. All of these don't apply at once, but quite often those entities who have a lack of social power are more likely to spread narratives. As in, for example, research by, I think, Usiski and Parent has shown that conspiracy theories exist for both Republicans and Democrats, but seem to be slightly more prevalent among the population that lost the recent election, because now they feel that they're not the ones in power. And then when the tides shift, suddenly the other side believes in more conspiracy theories. A lot of it comes from what I call information vacuums. And one of the realities of a pandemic or an epidemic is that there is a gulf between when science is able to answer questions about where it came from and how to treat it, and between where the public needs that information to be, because it takes science months, weeks, years to figure out how to treat it, where it came from, but the public wants answers now. And that creates these information vacuums where we need an answer to this thing. Science isn't giving it to us. And it seems like there's maybe this unconscious effort where we go back to the narratives from previous diseases, because that's what provided a sense of comfort, security, and safety then. And we just adopt them to what is currently happening in front of us. Oh, last time I just took vitamin C pills. I'll just take vitamin C pills this time, because that's what worked. So those information vacuums are one of the key factors. 4 is those previous narratives, including real ones. 5 is it provides us a sense of identity, and 6 is that it provides a sense of control. So if you put all 6 of those things together, one or more of those is usually what's happening, but especially combined with that information vacuum and the previous narratives, that's what seems to be one of the driving forces for why we keep telling the same stories.
So I wonder, do you see any evidence that over time, and especially in the midst of, perhaps in the wake of COVID, we're getting better at realizing these repeated patterns, right? In other words, do you see some evidence, even glimmeringly, of the way we've responded to COVID that evidences our learning to refuse the temptation of some of these narratives? Or are we still stuck basically in the same level of bounded rationality as concerns our own behaviors?
I would say it's more the latter there. One of the problems with the internet is that it's the best and worst double-edged sword that humanity has ever come up with. You can go on the internet and find an answer to pretty much anything, regardless of whether or not that answer is true. And you can find feedback that will confirm pretty much whatever it is that you want to have confirmed. Another way to look at this, and looking at some of the research that's come out recently, there was if we look at polls of how many people believe in conspiracy theories, what percentage of the population believes in conspiracy theories, a 2021 CBS News poll found that 13% of Democrats and 23% of Republicans said that QAnon ideas were probably or certainly true. A different poll found that 56% of Republicans said that it was possibly true, and 74% of Democrats said that it wasn't true. But then Usiski and Parent have also said that conspiracy theories exist pretty much in the same ratios between Republicans and Democrats. So it's difficult to answer the question, are we getting better or not? Because in some ways we don't have the data sets to look at that. I could certainly argue either way, that we're getting better at it because we have access to the previous narratives, and because we do have a large body of narratologists, which is Jill Lepore's word, who are trying to come out and at least show that there are these similar narratives that we're telling. And on the other hand, we have QAnon, which at one point was so massive that it is widely credited for being responsible for the January 6th attacks on the Capitol, which is the first time ever that we've had that sort of experience in this country. So it goes both ways. What I would say is probably the reality of the situation is that we've had a stretching where we now have more people on either side believing and non-believing, and a lot of sort of washing out in the middle where we're like, we're really not sure. So lots of yeses, lots of nos, not many sort of in the middles, I'm not really sures, as opposed to several decades ago when you maybe would have had more in the middle, I'm not sure, and it was sort of fringe elements that believed, especially in conspiracy theories, because 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have the internet to unite conspiracy theorists in the way that it does now, and there wasn't possible to have those same sense of feedback loops. So both good and bad. I know that's not a very good answer or confirming or reassuring in any way, but it seems to me that's what the response is.
So then I guess my question is, what's the next step for research that, like yours, that hopes to leverage the methods of folklore, the methods of narratology, the methods of discourse analysis in order to more articulately show the persistence and the lure of these belief structures? You know, like, given where we are right now, where are you going forward with your own work, given that ambivalence?
Sure. One of the very recent things, and this came out early this year, maybe late last year, so late 2020 to early 2021, and this is a new bit of research that a lot of folklorists are paying attention to. It comes out of the work of Timothy Tangerlini down at UCLA, I believe he is, where he is now taking narratives and feeding them essentially into an AI system that examines those narratives and is able to pull thousands of narratives apart in ways that a human being just simply can't because of the sheer weight of what it is that's happening. And Tangerlini's research is already in many ways revolutionizing the study of conspiracy theories, because he's able to show these overarching patterns in narratives that we just can't see with the human eye because there's too many of them. And one of the sort of exciting things that he's done recently is show the difference from a narrative perspective between an actual conspiracy and a conspiracy theory, because he gathered actual conspiracy narratives centered around Bridgegate, for the New Jersey episode where Governor Chris Christie shut down part of a highway or a bridge to get back at a different governor, and a conspiracy theory, Pizzagate, that Hillary Clinton was kidnapping children and selling them into a sex slavery ring in the basement of a pizza place. And what Tangerlini did was take all of these narratives, run them through this AI machine, and then look at the different domains, as he called them. And he found that in a real conspiracy theory, or in a real conspiracy, rather, like Bridgegate, there's generally one domain, in this case, New Jersey politics, and everything falls under that one domain. And the conspiracy takes a long time to uncover because you have to trace back all of the little nodes to prove this and this and this and this and this, but it's all under the one domain, as opposed to a conspiracy theory, which he said there were multiple domains, different places inside of Pizzagate: the Clinton family, the Podesta family, the Comet Pizzeria, sex trafficking, Satanism, and etc. And what a conspiracy theory seems to do is establish connections among these multiple domains that have never existed before. And you can establish those domains comparatively instantly to tracing back an actual conspiracy. And it's exciting because we've never really had that concrete set of data before to look at these differences. And now that we do have them, assuming Tangerlini is willing to share his AI programs with us, we can start to go out and do even more concrete research on what it is that is happening and how these narratives are being shaped. So I'm hoping more of us spend more time looking at that and incorporating it into our own research field work and whatnot, where we go talk to people and see what it is that they believe.
That sounds fascinating. Well, on that note, which is at least borderline optimistic, I'll say thanks to Dr. Lee for joining us today and talking a little bit about his research. I'd encourage everyone to go check out Epidemic of Rumors, again out 2014. And so with that, thank you.
Thank you very much.